So everyone has someone to blame for inflation. But I know who's really to blame. 10th century China. Now you're probably asking yourself, what does that have to do with price increases in the United States today? Actually, probably more than you think. You see, at that time, the ruling Tang dynasty had outlawed the use of silk as a form of currency, leaving copper coins as one of the only ways to do business with a medium of exchange. Now, as you can imagine, roaming the countryside with loads of copper coins was both dangerous and a bit impractical. So to solve this problem, merchants began leaving coins with a trusted person. In exchange, they would be given a receipt recording how much money they had deposited. Once the merchant returned from a business trip, their coins would be reimbursed in exchange for the receipt. By the 9th century, coin depositories began popping up all over the country, and now merchants could simply exchange the receipts for the coins they had on deposit as opposed to the coins themselves. This became known as flying money. And if that sounds a lot like, banking and commodity-backed paper money, that's because that's exactly what it was. But in the 960s, the new ruling dynasty of China, the Song, ran into a copper shortage and began issuing its own paper currency alongside the existing coins already in circulation. And this led to something remarkable which would forever change the course of economics. The ruling Song dynasty declared that their new form of paper currency would now be a state monopoly, controlled solely by the imperial government. Initially, things worked out okay, but in the 13th century, things started to change as the heirs of Genghis Khan set their sights on China, who by now had virtually bankrupted themselves in a series of wars with their Jin neighbors. In 1271, the Mongols conquered China. The Yuan Dynasty was formed, and they promptly made plans to go out and conquer other lands. The big question was, how are you going to pay for it? And that's when the dynasty picked up on this money printing scheme and figured they could really ramp this up a notch. After all, why risk angry nobles and peasant revolts over raising taxes to fund your wars of expansion when you can just print more money? But the result was an utter catastrophe. Under the rule of Kublai Khan in the early 1300s, inflation rose to 80% as the government kept printing more banknotes without end. When merchants and nobles began to refuse to honor the now worthless banknotes and instead demanded payment only in gold and silver, the Khan responded by just, banning the use of gold and silver. But while a political ruler might be able to ignore economic reality, you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring economic reality. And in short order, the Chinese economy collapsed under the weight of runaway inflation, and the Yuan Dynasty was not far behind, being overthrown about a generation later. But despite this powerful lesson on how inflation destroys an economy, that has not stopped political leaders across space and time from wondering if maybe everyone else just didn't do it right. Perhaps this time, with the right experts, ignoring economic reality would produce different and better results. And with inflation reaching 40-year highs in the United States, we may be on the verge of experiencing a very hard lesson, one that should have been learned about 700 years ago.